So why don't you just ask him for the money?
Or your fucking wife, you know.
Or your fucking wife, Jerry.
Well, they don't know I need it, see? Okay, so there's that. And even if they did, I wouldn't get it. So there's that on top then. See, these are personal matters.
Personal matters?
Yeah, personal matters that needn't,
Okay, Jerry. You're tasking us to perform this mission, but you won't. Oh, fuck it. Let's take a look at that Sierra.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where we are continuing our exploration of the Coen Brothers. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. I'm not going to
It's going to happen, man. It's going to happen in the course of this episode. It has to.
I am John Rocha, writer, producer, and host and voiceover guy in San Diego, California. And you know what? I'm really excited to dive into this movie because, look, Miller's Crossing was one of my favorite films, but Fargo, I have an uneasy relationship with Fargo. So I'm very excited to go back and forth with you and as we analyze and break down and discuss this really interesting film. And I even watched a Scorsese and a Roger Ebert discussion on this movie. It's so fascinating how much people love this movie, you know?
It's a weird one because, as I was saying to you off mic, like usually there are movies that I love, and normally the movies that I love, I understand.
Yes.
And then there's movies and understand how they work. I mean, if we didn't feel that we could explain how movies work, then we wouldn't have this podcast.
We wouldn't have a show.
Yes. Yeah. So most of the time, if I understand the movie, I understand and like it, then I understand what it's doing and how it's working.
Right.
I love this movie.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't understand how it works. It's like such an odd, it might be among the most peculiar movies we've ever done in the entire history of the Cine-Files.
I agree with you. I think it's one of the most challenging films, and it only comes in at a short hour and 38 minutes, but what it unlocks, what it explores, what it asks of you, and what it shows you about the human condition, even in a place that we have come to stereotypically believe is, you know, the salt of the earth, or been told the real America, or at times derogatorily been called flyover states. Like, there is so much within this film that is ripe for discussion. And we are the podcast to do it, because I was going to say scene by scene, you could analyze this film, break down stuff that's happening. And that's what we do on this show. So it's going to be an interesting task. And I'm assuming maybe 3 episodes of this movie as we dive in, man. But I agree with you. It's not one that I run and watch all the time. But when I do watch it, you admire it, and also it kind of scares you a little bit, this movie. And I think that's the power
that's what's
of it
so weird about that's what's so weird about it is that it's also really funny.
Yes.
It's enjoyable in its way. It has a lightness to it and a heaviness to it and a scariness to it. It is a very interesting movie. And I should say before we jump in that we can't make the Cine-Files without the incredible supporters we have on patreon.com/the Cine-Files. That's what allows John and I to do these deep dives into these amazing films. So if you're interested, you can go to patreon.com/the Cine-Files, where you can get ad-free versions of the show. You can also listen to our Cine-Files shorts. Our watch-alongs this month's watch-along in honor of the Coen Brothers is going to be on Raising Arizona. So if you want to hear us do a commentary track on one of the funniest movies of the 80s and one of both of our favorites, then you got to go to patreon.com/the Cine-Files.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for those of you who listen to us on the podcast, who listen to the commercials as well, if there's a ad that appeals to you, if there's a product that appeals to you from the people who support us, the companies who support us here on the Cine-Files, we really would appreciate you all using the code that is attached to those commercials there, so that you can support us in that way as well, if you're inclined to support us and if those products stand out to you, so we can encourage more and more of these companies and these businesses to support us here on the Cine-Files. So make sure you do that when you're listening to it and hear a product or a service that you really want to try out. Use our code.
And without further ado, John, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You might be shocked by this question.
Okay.
How did you first come to the film Fargo?
I have to believe that I saw this in Virginia and probably with a friend of mine, maybe Clay at the time. And I just remember that it was, even more of a furthering of my love of the Coen Brothers and the gutsiness of the Coen Brothers. And I think that really stood out to me as I was watching it this time around. Like, wow, this is a film that I remember watching, almost 30 years ago. And I remember the effect it had on me, and it is still having that effect all these years later. So it's a fascinating film. And I just remember sitting in the theater afterwards trying to figure out what I had just watched. But I knew it was great, What about you?
I saw it. I was living in Los Angeles, and I saw it. There used to, I don't know if you remember, there was a movie theater on La Brea that was kind of up above Melrose, and maybe it was already closed by the time you came to LA because it no longer exists.
Yes, they turned into yoga studios.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I went with a bunch of film student friends, and we all went to see it, all huge fans of the Coen Brothers, and just were like, what the hell is this? And instantly fell in love with it. I think. Would you like to know how much pre-production I have on the movie Fargo?
Sure. What have you got?
0.
What?
Literally, I don't have anything. Like, wow. I read Wikipedia pages. I went on, I have some stories about some of the casting, and we'll get to some of that as we go along. Mm-hmm. But all I really have is that this was an American-British co-production, that they wanted to do something smaller. We're after Hudsucker Proxy. Right. And while Barton Fink got a lot of attention, it didn't do that well. Miller's Crossing didn't do that well. And so these guys with all of this attention and all of this potential, they have to scale back. And so they're doing this smaller movie, and that is the totality of my pre-production for the film.
And wasn't it, weren't we discussing this in Miller's Crossing? There was like writer's blocks or something like that connected to Fargo?
Yeah, I've heard this over and over again about them, is that they write up to a certain point, and when they get stuck, they just pivot to a different movie. And I think this was, I believe, I think you're right, that this was the next movie they wanted to do.
Yes.
Was The Big Lebowski. Yeah. But Jeff Bridges wasn't available, and so that's why they ran off to make this movie. So I guess, yes, you reminded me of one more tiny bit of pre-production that we actually had, but that's really it. Well, it goes to this other thing, which we mentioned since the beginning. The Coen Brothers don't talk about their own work.
Yeah, not that much.
And normally the director or director's commentary track or interviews and stuff, I watched a couple of interviews with them talking about this film. They don't say that much, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, and this is a film that received a lot of criticism initially when it first came out from people in those areas. But I mean, this is where the Coen Brothers are from. So in a way, they're telling a story about their own upbringing. And I know that the Minnesota Nice thing is something that they wanted to put on the screen to show this kind of veneer that is going on in their areas or where they grew up and where they lived that covered over or papered over some more sinister things or some more nefarious things that were going on with people who were there amongst their lives growing up, So it's a fascinating approach, but you're right. There's not a lot of pre-production on this film.
Well, and I would say I'm not going to disagree with what you just said, but I also I don't know that, yes, they're from this area.
Yeah.
But I don't know that and so they're around some people like this, but that doesn't mean that there was some seedy underbelly in their world growing up with. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's not. Well, and actually, this brings us. Let's just go into the movie because it brings us to the very first and very bizarre moment of the film, which is Tex comes up on screen. Yeah. And like a lot of movies, it tells us that this is a true story. It says the events depicted in this film took place in Minnesota in 1987 at the request of their survivors. The names have been changed. Out of respect for the dead, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred. So, John, this is apparently based on a true story, real grisly murders. It happened in the snows of Minnesota and North Dakota. Wow, terrifying.
I know. I spent years believing that this was based on a true story and they put their own spin on it until the Fargo TV series. And then, interviews came out and it got revealed that this was never a true story. This is not based on any kind of true story. And apparently, for years after this movie came out, police had to deal with people calling them all the time with tips on these murders or tips on these things themselves believing the story to be true. So it's interesting, the power of film and how it can encourage people
It
to
says
do
it's
something.
true. I mean,
It's not true. Yeah, there's nothing true.
I mean, like, we've said for years that not to believe the based on a true story in a movie, and that you're getting, like we just did The Sound of Music, where the lives of the Von Trapp family bore very little resemblance to what happens in that film. But that being said, this one is so bizarre because they went on. I watched them. They were on an interview on Charlie Rose, and they're still talking about it as it's a true story.
Right.
Bill Macy, William H. Macy, who's obviously amazing in this movie, and this is the movie that makes him a star.
Yes.
He comes onto the set and he says, "So tell me about the real case." And they go, "What real case?" And he goes, "The case the movie's based on." And then they say, "Oh, there's no case." And he says, "Yeah, but at the front of the script," he pulls out his script. He's like, "So the front of the script, it says," and they go, "No, we just made that up." And apparently, William Macy just stared at them for a while and said, "You can't do that." And they said, "Why not?"
I love that. You can't do that.
Well, and what's so funny about it is their question of why not. It's like, well, it's a movie. The whole thing's made up. We make up things all the time. Why can't we just say it's true?
And that's the impetuousness of young intellectuals. Yeah, why not? Let's mess with the audience. Let's mess with the perception. And no one's going to sue us. Like, who's going to sue us to claim that, this was a true story or this wasn't a true story and you lied to me and I went into a movie theater and I want my money back? Like, that's not going to happen. And I think adding that element to it makes you even more attentive to the movie, even more engrossed by the film, because you're like, wow, how much of this is true and how much of this is a little bit of embellishment. There's a reason Dateline and there's a whole cottage industry of true crime, because people are fascinated by people's actions, normal human beings' actions in situations, people we live with, people we work with, people we run into at the grocery store. These are people that are capable of so many things, and watching those shows makes you aware of it. And so why not add that extra layer of attention to the film by claiming that it's a true story? I just was amazed that for years they get away with this before getting called out about it. It's amazing.
It's just one of the tiny little bizarre things in this movie. And then you hear that great Carter Burwell score. I mean, it's just haunting and serious and of a particular time and place. And then we're in the black, and then we fade to white. Yeah. And I think that the fade to white is critical. It's a critical choice in this film. Yeah. It's that feeling of the snow. As we come into the shot, there's this film school term that I learned that's called ambiguous space. And this comes from one of the great professors at USC Film School, which is Bruce Block. And everybody I know that in about 25 years that school, you said, what's the most important class you took in film school? And they would say, oh, Bruce Block's class on visual expression. Yeah, I mean, so many of us felt that way. And this idea of ambiguous space is that you're looking at a thing and you don't know what you're looking at first. And then what happens this happens several times in this movie, is then what happens is suddenly you go like, oh, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at a parking lot. I'm looking at a street, but you didn't know it first. And so it gives you that moment of confusion, that little moment of being out of place. And then you sort of lock in. And that's what's happening here, because then what we see is that we're not just looking at the white, we're looking at a snowy road, and we're seeing this car coming towards us with its headlights in slow motion. It's a really, really powerful opening image.
Yeah, that you can't escape the sense of impending doom that this image, along with the Carter Burwell score, sparks in you right off the bat. Immediately, you're in for something a lot more devastating or unsettling, for lack of a better word there. And this thing coming out of the whiteness, it's, people talk about something coming out of the darkness. And people who live in these areas talk about snow blindness, right? And so it's almost as bad as being in the dark, and you feel that way, even though you're surrounded by white, and even in the middle of the day, and it can make you blind. And to see this thing coming out with the score, it's almost like a beast with these four legs walking through towards some sort of impending doom, and it's dragging a car behind itself, but it could be dragging a carcass or whatever behind itself.
Right.
So you have that feeling. It evokes that as you're watching this from the beginning. Something you can't stop, going in slow motion, that comes out of this this all whiteness. It's fascinating.
Well, and it's also so much not the way most movies open.
Yeah. Right.
You're just watching a snowy road and a car hauling another car through the snow. But the music is so dramatic that it has this really powerful effect. I love, by the way, little details like how they do the titles with the sort of words spreading out and stuff is very cool.
Yes.
So most of this was shot outside of St. Paul, Minnesota. It is shot in the middle of winter.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there was very little snow while they were shooting it.
Oh, wow.
It was the least precipitation there had been in decades in Minnesota. And so they were desperate to get actual shots of it snowing. And so the day that this happened, they basically just had a standing order that any day that we get real snow, someone's got to go out and film this car because this is the opening shot of the movie.
Right.
And so they were actually shooting another scene and they couldn't leave the scene. And so Roger Deakins and the Coen Brothers, they just send out one of their camera operators to film this shot and one of the shots at the end of the film. That's how they got this.
Well, that explains why it doesn't look like William H. Macy's in the car, even though it is William H. Macy. Yeah.
Right. And so we see the title and then we fade to black. We know we're in Fargo, North Dakota, and we see this car pull up outside of the King of Clubs, which looks like a swinging, happening bar.
Hey-o.
We go inside, and there is William H. Macy, Jerry Lundegaard.
Yeah.
This is, as I said, this is the movie that makes him a star.
But yeah, William H. Macy, I mean, as you said, Steve, this is the film that announces him. But of course, we'd seen him in a number of things. We'd seen him we've seen him in so many great films and doing so many amazing thing. So it's kind of crazy to think back that there was a time when William H. Macy was not a well-known name, considering how much he became someone we have in our pop culture, both TV and movies,
Absolutely. So he gets called in to read for one of the trooper parts, that's going to be one of those people with Marge. And he did the accent and they liked it so much that he's in the audition room and the Coen Brothers say, "Hey, do you want to take a look at this other part?" And they hand him the sides for Jerry. And so he goes outside, and I'm sure you've had this situation where suddenly you're sitting in the waiting room and you got to prep something real quick. Yeah. So he reads this thing in 20 minutes, and then he goes back in and reads for Jerry. And they say, "Oh, that's pretty good. Why don't you come back in tomorrow with a little more prep and do it again?" Yeah. So he comes back the next day. He stayed up all night to prep. He comes back the next day, does it, and they go, "That was pretty good." And they don't give him the part. and Macy at this point knows that this is the part. Like he knows that he just feels it. And so he decides to fly to New York City on his own dime because he hears that they're going to hold another round of auditions with New York actors. And he just barges in. No appointment. No, he just shows up again, ready to audition. And he knew that this could alienate them. He knew that this is a bold move and you're generally not supposed to show up unannounced or uninvited to an audition, but he felt he was born to play this role and he walked in and he sold it in the room. He had that part.
And to prove to you that being in Hollywood, you can be an overnight success that takes you 15 years to get there. Here are some of the films that you will spot William H. Macy in, and he's sometimes credited, sometimes not credited. Somewhere in Time, the Christopher Reeve movie.
Oh, wow.
He's in War Games, the Matthew Broderick film. He's in The Last Dragon. He's in Woody Allen's Radio Days. He's in Barton Fink as a Navy sailor. He's in Homicide, which is an awesome movie with Joe Mantegna. He's in Shadows in the Fog for Woody Allen again. He's in Benny and June with Johnny Depp. And he's in The Client. He's in Oleana. He's in Murder in the First, Mr. Holland's Opus, Down Periscope, and then eventually in Fargo. And that's just a sample because he was also in a number of TV shows doing one-off characters in shows. So this is a guy who had spent quite some time. By the way, out of Miami, Florida. If there's any person I would have never pegged was out of Miami. He's
from Miami?
Florida. Yeah, William H. Macy was born in Miami, Florida. So it's like crazy to think that he's a guy I would never consider to be from Miami, but he spent all this time, piece by piece, step by step, building his resume, building his work up until this point. So he is arguably a veteran. And as you said, Steve, it made sense that in this moment, he realized this could be the role that catapults me into the stratosphere. The Coen brothers were becoming a name. And so him flying to New York to take a chance like this, great legends are built from the moments you take a chance. And it's no surprise that somewhere inside of him, he felt and knew that he could be more. And here was the chance for him to be more. And sure enough, he was 100% right.
I mean, at some point, you got to take your shot.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I heard that in a musical somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you the totally minor thing I learned because of William H. Macy was, and I had actually seen him. I saw the Cooler at Sundance.
I love that movie. Oh,
really, really great movie, and he's great in it. And he was in the Q&A, and everyone's referring to him as Bill. And hey, here's Bill Macy.
Yeah.
Great to see Bill Macy because everyone knows him as Bill Macy.
Right.
And I was like, well, why is he not named Bill Macy? And that's when I learned that there's only one Screen Actor Guild member who can be a certain part. And Bill Macy was the person who was married to Maude in the TV show Maude. Yeah. And so that is why he is William H. Macy.
Right. Exactly. Was it? Yeah, there's two Michael Douglases, right?
Right. That's Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton is Michael.
Right. There's two Michael
his real
Keatons.
name is Michael Douglas.
Yeah, exactly.
But we digress. We walk into this rough and tumble bar. This guy's playing pool, and he walks up to Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare, who's sitting sleeping, and they are an incredible crime duo, I think.
Yeah. We all know Steve Buscemi. We've seen him in a number of things, and of course, we talked about him in Miller's Crossing, but Peter Stormare is an interesting cat. You know, he's a Swedish actor, and so he's essentially almost a Max von Sydow type of thing, where he has completely been integrated into American culture because we've seen him in so many movies, so many Coen Brothers movies, of course, and with Big Lebowski, he's one of the three nihilists there, along with Flea, who persecute Lebowski as well. But I mean, he is a guy who studied for years to be an actor, like studied from his time in Sweden and what their version of high school is into the Royal Academy of Art there in Sweden. He played Hamlet for Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman directed him as Hamlet in a production very early on in his life. You've seen him in Prison Break, Lost World, Jurassic Park, playing God, The Big Lebowski, as I mentioned, Armageddon, the great role of Armageddon as the Russian astronaut as well. Wind Talkers, I worked with him in that scene when he's delivering the monologue inside of that hut with everyone. Couldn't remember his lines to save his life. It was an entire day going line by line through his entire monologue. It was a hell of a learning experience for me that I was so scared that you had to learn all these lines. But no, when you're doing movies, sometimes they'll just keep waiting until you get all the lines right and take after take after take. So
I mean, if they have to,
right, exactly right. Certain
we
people
don't want to wait for you to. We would prefer that you know your lines.
Well, it's no surprise that the film went over budget as badly as it did. But of course, I love him in Constantine. Maybe the best version of the devil ever on screen. And so just a fascinating actor in so many ways, and just completely ingratiated into the American culture by appearing in so many American movies. And it's always fun when he's not playing a villain because you get to really see who he is as an actor, you know. But here he is chilling, and it only speaks 18 lines of dialogue in the entire movie. Phenomenal.
Well, that's what's funny. So first of all, the Coen brothers, I knew, had seen him in a production of Hamlet. I had no idea until this moment that it was an Ingmar Bergman production of Hamlet. I only assumed that's the same production. Yeah. And they immediately said, we have a part for you. And we had talked about him being in Miller's Crossing, but wasn't able to do it. And he gives them, they give him the script, and he goes, what part? This guy didn't say anything. And they go, don't worry, it's going to be great. And I get it. Like, you just like, and it is great. It's amazing what he does, and his character is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm Jerry Lundegaard.
You're Jerry Lundegaard?
Yeah. Shep Proudfoot said...
Shep said you'd be here at 7:30. What gives, man?
Shep said 8:30.
We've been sitting here an hour. He's peed 3 times already.
Oh, I'm sure sorry. Shep told me 8:30. It was a mix-up, I guess.
Which maybe we should just talk to it now. What do you think of this accent, of the quote-unquote Minnesota nice that we're going to have so much of in this movie?
I think this is the only scene that's actually shot in Fargo. But I think the accent is fantastic. And look, it's the Coen Brothers, so everything is going to be slightly overdone. When you watch Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, they really lean into some of the Southern accents. I mean, Stephen Root saying, that is some mighty fine picking and a singing, or homie being let out, is I, or is I not your, is you or is you not my constituency? These are little things, they overdo them because there is a feeling of playfulness in that. But this is a very serious movie. And the fact that comes through as chillingly as it does throughout the whole film, even though these accents are a bit overdone, I think speaks to the genius of the Coen Brothers. And I know as I said earlier, that quite a few people from that area were upset about it, but eventually they've come to embrace it because it led to a lot of tourism in that area. I think it's not done to make fun. I think it's more done from a place of familiarity, and they have to have a little bit of uniqueness to it. And the Coen Brothers have this unique sense of humor amidst all the drama of their movies. And it's like life. Life is funny and life is fucked up. And so their movies are full of that because that's how life actually is,
It's funny. We talked about when we did our whole breakdown of their whole careers that they really have an attraction for lovable losers or lovable buffoons.
Yeah.
And I think the key word there is lovable. The reason I would say they're not making fun of these characters or the characters in Oh Brother or Nicolas Cage's character in Raising Arizona is that they love them. Yeah. That's why it's not making fun of them, is that there's deep love for these people and how they speak. And it comes through all the time. Unfortunately for Jerry Lundegaard, he has showed up an hour late. So he's already on the wrong foot with these guys.
You got the car?
Yeah, you bet. It's out in the lot there. Brand new burnt umber Sierra.
I love Bill Macy's voice, and I can't not start to imitate it as I'm saying these lines,
Of course, yeah.
So, we all set on this thing then?
Sure, Jerry, we're all set. Why wouldn't we be?
Yeah, no, I'm sure you are. Shep vouched for you and all. I got every confidence here in you fellas.
So we're starting to get a sense that there's some sort of plot here and that it's something somehow criminal.
Here are the keys.
No, that's not it, Jerry.
Huh?
The new vehicle plus $40,000.
Yeah, but the deal was the car first, then the $40,000. Like as if it was the ransom.
So now we know that they're talking about a kidnapping. And I think the combo of what we're getting about Jerry's character and the fact that he is setting up a kidnapping is part of what makes Fargo such an interesting movie.
Yeah, and I also think, and I've seen some and read some stuff over the years about this film, that it's an interesting commentary on masculinity as well. And look, because it's a predominantly male film. And here we go right off the bat with this scene, right? You have Steve Buscemi's character, who is clearly thinking that he is the boss of the situation. He's this smaller, skinnier, nebbish kind of guy, but he's also the one who's barking the most. Peter Stormar is sitting there almost asleep with his cigarette in his mouth because he's a guy that doesn't have to do much because he knows that when he does something, it's all the way. And here comes Jerry, and he's all like, clearly he is a guy who is stressed out. He won't tell them why he's in the financial difficulty. And we never really find out why he needs this money. There's no real thing that's pointed to. He just needs this money. And they start to go into this whole idea of, why don't you just ask your wife? What's wrong with you? Why don't you just ask your wife about it? Why don't you just get your money from your wife or get your money from your dad-in-law? And you see that this is an emasculated man. And you see that one man is trying to put on airs that he's this big, tough guy when he's a really easily defeated guy. The other guy, who isn't talking much, is clearly the actual person in control of this whole situation. And William H. May and Lundegaard, Jerry Lundegaard in there is completely a guy who is emasculated by the world. And in some messed up way is trying to find some way to stand on his own 2 feet in a situation that he has found himself in. So it's a fascinating opening to this movie that lays out the whole reason the movie is happening, but also gives us a window into the kind of men we're going to be dealing with throughout this whole film.
It's a great point, and I hadn't quite thought of it that way. But what's so interesting is like you have the bottom low status, which is Jerry, and
Jerry.
then in terms of masculinity and strength and toughness, Carl Buscemi's character is way above Jerry.
Yes,
but actually, Gare, this Peter Stormare character, is actually way above Carl. And then you have this threesome where there's this sort of these levels. We have the same thing going on with Wade, Jerry's father-in-law, and Stan.
And Stan.
This other thing where there's these levels of status and power that happen. And it's interesting too, because who is the lead of this movie? Who is the hero? Yeah. It's the pregnant, cop.
Yes,
the
cop, right. Exactly.
So the antithesis is as far away from a test of masculinity as you possibly could be, except that she is the toughest person in the movie.
And the smartest.
And the smartest, yeah. So as you said, the plot is to kidnap Jerry's wife. He's going to get $80,000 in ransom, 40 grand of which is going to go to the kidnappers, and he keeps the other 40. And there's a really key piece of information that comes up because he says,
"It's not me paying the ransom. The thing is, my wife, she's wealthy. Her dad, he's real well off. Now, I'm in a bit of trouble."
What kind of trouble are you in, Jerry?
Well, that's, I'm not gonna get into, see, I just need the money. Now, her dad, he's real well off.
That line is such a perfect example of something William H. Macy talks about, which is that he says every hesitation, every pause, every stutter, every repeated word was specifically written by the Coen Brothers. This isn't improv. This is word for word how they wanted this character to sound.
Yeah. William H. Macy said in an interview that almost nothing is improvised by him in the movie in terms of his speech patterns. There are a couple of acting things that are improvised, but overall, it was all in the script, which is amazing.
I also think that line of, "I'm in a bit of trouble." What kind of trouble do you think Jerry is in?
I think this is so fascinating because clearly I think it's gambling. And again, because I've seen the movie a few times and did some research on the film, and the hypothesis or the guess that I've seen that I find believable is that he has gotten himself into some gambling issues, and it's quite a lot of money. It's not just the 80,000. I think it's in the 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, maybe into the 300, 600,000. As we find out later with the lot and everything like that, there's a lot of money and angles he was trying to play here to get himself this money. Maybe, as someone pointed out, that he has a lot of golf trophies in his office, or at his home. So maybe that he's a guy who bets on golf, and that's where he got himself in this kind of situation. And you know what? It would make all the sense in the world that he would be a guy who wouldn't necessarily bet on the NFL or Major League Baseball and golf. That makes all the sense in the world that he would bet on something like that, because he's a guy who's clearly trying to aspire to be more than who he is, and yet he can't get there. And so he got himself in a pickle, and I think that's what it is. And also in this whole scene, I think this movie is an interesting. I watched this movie without putting it in my mind that I don't believe a word that Jerry says when he talks to anybody, and it's a fascinating way to watch the movie. And so I think he knew he was supposed to be there at 8:30 or at 7:30, but he's late because Jerry's going to go on his own time because he's a fuck up. And the $40,000, I think he actually was supposed to give them $40,000, but he's using the Shep Proudfoot saying, "Oh, Shep must have got it wrong," to keep the money in some way. And so I think all the things he's saying to everybody is a lie, everything. And I think this is an interesting way to watch the movie. So that's how I watched it this time. So I don't believe anything he's telling these guys about anything, except that he needs to have his wife kidnapped.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what's so interesting about this movie is like we get clues from watching films about how we're supposed to feel about various characters.
Yeah.
And there's so much of the way Jerry is presented that is the put upon, kind of nebbish, struggling, nervous person. And usually in movies, those are characters that we feel sympathy for.
Yes.
And there's so much about about Jerry's life. I mean, particular fucking Wade, who's such an asshole. Like that you would go like, oh, I'm going to feel sympathy. And so there's part of me, particularly watching the movie the first time, where I'm like going, oh, here's this, weak kind of nerdy guy. And I feel bad for him. But after you've watched the movie, and particularly if you watch it more than once, it's like, oh, Jerry's a sociopath.
Oh, yeah.
He's a terrible, terrible person.
He's 100%. I mean, one, having his wife kidnapped, who seems like a very sweet person, who's very caring and loving, and then forgetting to even tell Scotty about the fact that his wife's been kidnapped. He's more focused on getting this information to what's his name, to Wade and Jerry, Wade and his compatriot there, so that they can set up the money. He practices how he's going to react and tell Wade the news. And so there's so much about how he does things that's absolutely a sociopathic approach to everything. And I think this is one of the worst human beings ever. It's just that he hides away in this kind of, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, I told you. Yeah, okay. And he hides away in that because that's been his act his whole life.
Yeah.
I think his whole life he's been like this. And he thinks this is his chance to break out,
Well, and most of the evil sociopaths in film history are evil geniuses.
Yes.
They're all charismatic and brilliant and cunning and scary and sometimes very sexy.
Yeah.
And that is not Jerry. Jerry is none of those things.
No.
And they start to push him on it. They go, so because he mentions that his father-in-law is wealthy, and they say, so why didn't you ask him for the money?
Or your fucking wife,
Or your fucking wife, Jerry.
Well, it's all part of this. They don't know I need it, see? Okay, so there's that. And even if they did, I wouldn't get it. So there's that on top then. See, these are personal matters.
Personal matters?
Yeah, personal matters that needn't,
Okay, Jerry.
I love every line that he says is so, all the little internal reversals and beat work and insecurities there. I love it all.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, right, if we talk about masculinity, these guys are saying, why don't you ask your wife for it? Or why don't you ask the stronger, more successful man for that money? And he's making it really clear that he doesn't have that option in his life because, as we're going to find out later, Wade doesn't give two shits about him in a lot of ways,
And Carl is starting to push a little bit because he wants to, because he feels there's something hinky about this situation. So he starts to push. And I love the moment in this next line where mid-push, he just gives up.
Yeah.
You're tasking us to perform this mission, but you won't. Oh, fuck it. Let's take a look at that Sierra.
And we fade out.
Yeah. You know why? Because everybody in this film, aside from Marge and her husband, are kind of fuck ups. And so in even the most successful, even Wade, because his stupid ass has to go and be the one in the parking lot with the money and what happens to him. But like in this scene, these guys are people who have not accomplished their lives. And so it makes so much sense that the scene would end halfway through a sentence of him trying to press for more information and then just go, you know what, fuck it, let's go look at the car. It doesn't really matter anyway, because I think Carl does that because Carl has kind of made it clear that he is the kind of the alpha dog in his mind. He's asserted his authority, but he also knows that Jerry is not going to give him anything. So he's like, fuck it, what's the point of pushing? And they go out to the car. It's great.
Well, it's like they're pretending to be big time criminals. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to act. And the same when we meet Shep, is like they're trying. Shep is tough, certainly, but they're all trying to act like they have more status or ability than they actually have.
Welcome to manhood. I mean, most men I've ever known, including myself sometimes, have to overblow their status in the world in order to feel important or in order to feel like they're still the hero of their own stories. And that's a hard thing to accept, but it's the truth with a lot of men.
I'm sure you've witnessed this of me. I'm so bad at it. When men start being men and shit giving and being macho with each other, and I don't really do that very well. I never have.
Right. Yeah.
So we fade out, and now we're in Minneapolis, and Jerry is coming home with some groceries, and his wife is there chopping some vegetables. Ask how was Fargo, and this is Kristen Rudward, who plays Jean.
Yeah, so Kristen was born and went to grade school in Fargo, North Dakota. So you could argue she's a local hire. She went to high school in Fargo. She graduated from Minnesota State University, Moorhead. She studied acting in London, then returned briefly to Fargo and went to New York City, where she found success in the theater. She had a part in Amadeus. I wonder if she played the Cynthia Nixon role or if she played Wolfie's wife. I could totally see that. She performed a public theater reading of Othello with Al Pacino. And then after she returned to Fargo, that's where she started to focus on film and got cast in this role. And it had a small role in Pleasantville and Drop Dead Gorgeous. She's been in Chicago Hope, All My Children. And she even appeared as Linda in the Fargo TV series in the 7th episode of the 5th season there as well. So yeah, great choice. She plays it so well. And I love her in the movie for the limited time we get with her, because there's nothing about her that makes you feel like she's someone that should be kidnapped or be in this position. And she's very much a victim in a lot of ways in this movie.
She's fully a victim. She seems completely lovely. And I think performance-wise, she just seems completely real. This whole 100%. This room we just walked into, it just feels like this house in Minnesota. It just feels like real people, you know?
Yeah, the Coen Brothers show off with their production design in things like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, or in Miller's Crossing, right? But this stuff is just as important. Nailing what this home would look like when you walk into it is just as important. And I think they do a great job, the production designer, throughout the whole film to make it feel authentic.
Roger Deakins talked a lot about this. And what was so interesting, obviously the cinematographer who worked with the Coen Brothers on most of their movies from this point forward. Yeah. And what's so interesting about what he said was he said that unlike Barton Fink or Hudsucker, both of which he shot, they didn't want this to feel like a movie. Those clearly feel like movies. Right. Those feel like we are in the cinematic vision of the Coen Brothers and Roger Deakins. Yeah. They wanted this to feel observational, that we're literally just a camera just is set up and is watching the real world. And what I love about that, and what I particularly, again, my admiration for Roger Deakins really knows no bounds, is like the guy that has made some of the most beautiful images in the history of cinematography. Like just, you know, Blade Runner 2049 or something like that, where you're just like, you're watching and you're Shawshank or any of these other ones, you're going, oh my God, this is so gorgeous. Yeah. The guy who is capable of that is consciously not doing that. Yeah. You know, and going, no, we don't want this to look gorgeous. We don't want this to be spectacular. We want this to look like it's just being filmed. That's kind of amazing. I agree. To know when to show off and when not to show off is an essential skill. And certainly this is a film where you don't need to show off, but the authenticity of it in a subtle way is the showing off, because you're able to do it and frame it so well. I love the moment where he thinks he's just chatting with his wife, and then she says, "Dad's here." And you see William H. Macy's face just completely fall as he turns over and sees his father-in-law, Wade, watching TV. And this, of course, is Harve Presnell playing this part. Harve Presnell, fascinating guy. He began his career in the mid-1950s as a classical baritone singer. He sang with orchestras and opera companies throughout the United States, and then started moving into musical theater in the 1960s. Meredith Willson cast him in a leading role in the new Broadway musical that you may know called The Unsinkable Molly Brown. Oh. His portrayal of Leadville Johnny was a resounding success, and he reprised the role in the film version of the musical, where he won a Golden Globe for his portrayal. But he didn't find a lot of work in the movies. So from 1970 to 1995, he just worked in musical theater. He was a part of a long-running production of Annie as Daddy Warbucks there throughout. He worked in the West End. He worked in Broadway and in New York. And then in his early 60s, he found a resurgence in movies. This was the first role back into movies, was this role here in Fargo. Then he was in The Whole Wide World, Saving Private Ryan, Flags of Our Fathers. He was in the TV shows The Pretender, Andy Barker, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Dawson's Creek. And then sadly passed away in 2009 at the age of 75 of pancreatic cancer in Santa Monica, California. So a fascinating guy who led a really interesting life and was successful in multiple areas of entertainment. And truth is told, there you just never know when you're going to make it as an actor on film. And the time came for him when he got to his 60s, and he was able to do great work in everything. And he's fantastic in this role, because we all know a guy like him.
We all know a guy like Wade, whether it was one of our friends' dads or it's our own dad or our grandpa or someone we work with. We all know a Wade, a gruff guy who's very much in his own world and thinks he knows he's right on every situation.
He has what I would call the arrogance of quote unquote success. Is that he is it's now I don't maybe he is totally a self-made man and is a brilliant businessman.
Possibly.
Maybe he just inherited this money, and maybe, which is my feeling, is that Stan Grossman is actually a fantastic businessman and Wade is like, you know, taking advantage of it. But Wade believes, because he is wealthy and successful, that every single thought that he has or decision he makes is absolutely the right one. And anyone who doesn't listen to him is a fool. That's what he thinks.
And he is the symbol of old school masculinity, what some people call toxic masculinity. I won't go that far, but he certainly is the symbol of old school masculinity, the gruff guy who's going to do what he wants to do. He's made his money. He's probably been super ruthless in business, and everyone else is expendable. And nothing shows you that more than when he's trying to, quote, horse trade for his daughter by trying to give them less money for the return of his own daughter. He's not a great guy.
Well, and in particular, you know that everyone at the car dealership and every other business and everyone else he deals with has kissed his ass for decades.
Oh, yeah, right.
And now it's just kind of there. And so just in the moments with him being dismissive of Jerry while he's watching, TV, and I love, and again, Macy's performance is so great because he says in the nicest voice that covers up his real displeasure in the situation.
Is he staying for supper then?
Yeah, I think so. Dad?
What?
Are you staying for supper?
Yeah.
And then you just see Jerry's face fall. And then we cut to the awkward dinner. We have their kid, Scotty, who's like leaning back, asked to be excused because he wants to head to McDonald's to meet up with his friends.
Right.
And Wade, and this is again the grandparent getting involved in the parenting or criticizing the parenting of the child.
He's going to McDonald's instead of finishing here.
He sees his friends there. It's okay.
It's okay, McDonald's. What do you think they do there? They don't drink milkshakes, I assure you.
They don't drink milkshakes.
And what's so is that you feel, this is what we were saying before.
Yeah.
I feel really bad for Jerry, because this is what his life is like all the fucking time.
Initially, yes, at the beginning of the movie, I feel bad for Jerry. You're 100% right, because the way it's presented and okay, I can understand. He looks like a hard done guy whose father-in-law has basically got him by the balls, and so he's trying to have his wife. Not that I'm condoning anything that he's doing, but you can understand why he would be desperate enough to do this. So initially, you kind of feel for Jerry and what he's going through, because Wade is clearly a guy who has stepped on Jerry for a majority of life. It makes you wonder how his wife was able to convince her father to let Jerry marry her, and what the whole courtship was like. Is this someone who was never hit on by anybody? And so the fact that Jerry Lundegaard maybe saw her as someone he could take advantage of, and so he wooed her in that way in order to have an easy ticket to wealth. And so that may have been the approach he had taken in this situation, because I can only imagine what Jerry's wife's experience was like, what Jean's experience was like growing up with Wade as her dad. You know what I'm saying? This domineering, protective guy who, even when his grandson is going to McDonald's, like, they're not just drinking shakes, I can tell you that. Well, how do you know? You don't know what they're doing, but it's in your mind that you've created this kind of nonsense. So he probably kept Jean pretty close to the house all the time. So probably ran off all her suitors, and Jerry was the only one that was able to get through because he didn't seem like a threat to Wade in any way, shape, or form,
Maybe that's what it's got to be, because I've always wondered too, like how the hell Jean seems like a lovely, nice person. I mean, we don't spend very much time with her, but she seems like a lovely person. And I just go, how the hell did Jerry, romance Jean? Like how did he pull this off?
Yeah.
And right now, Jerry brings up this investment opportunity that he's been talking to Wade about.
Wade, have you had a chance to think about that deal I was talking about, those 40 acres there in Wayzata?
You told me about it.
Yeah, you said you'd have to think about it. I understand it's a lot of money.
It's a heck of a lot. What did you say you were going to put there?
A lot. It's a limited...
I know it's a lot.
I mean, a parking lot.
Yeah, well, 750,000 is a lot.
I like the little jokes there. One of the things you could tell, and again, this is just the great writing, is it's the constant interruptions of Jerry.
Yes.
Is that Wade doesn't let Jerry finish a thought or a sentence because he has absolutely zero respect for him.
Yep.
And it is totally transparent.
Yeah, well, it's a chunk, but
I had a
I
couple
think-
lots, late 50s, lost a lot of money. A lot of money.
Yeah, but the
I
difference.
thought you were going to show it to Stan Grossman. He passes on this stuff before it gets kicked up to me.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, the cutting off, as you said, the cutting off, the stepping on him, the pushing him. It's a way of bullying him verbally without bullying him directly. And it's very clear. And Jerry has probably had to navigate these interruptions, as you said, Steve, the majority of his life dealing with Wade. And so it's no surprise that they fall into this rhythm. And Jerry is trying to do something here. And Wade, instead of being encouraging, in some ways, Wade is a little bit threatened by Jerry having an idea, having a possibility, because he shoots it down. It isn't until Stan takes a look at it and Stan gives him the A-OK that all of a sudden Wade is in love with this idea of the lots and what have you. So it's just his immediate reaction is just to shoot it down, question it, think it's stupid, and what have you, because he's probably always thought that Jerry was a dummy, And
One thing that and it comes up right here that I find hilarious is the off-screen status, almost heroic status that is given to the great Stan Grossman.
Yeah.
Like everybody's like, well, Stan Grossman says this. I mean, I believe Stan Grossman. Well, Stan says it. I mean, like he's just like the guru. He's like the mini guru of this particular community.
Yeah.
Stan will say no dice. That's why you pay him. I'm asking you here, Wade. This could work out real good for me and Gene and Scotty.
And Wade's response, again, is fascinating.
Gene and Scotty never have to worry.
Yeah, we've discussed, right? And the camera perfectly placed. You see the way he looks down at Jerry when he says that, right? Not only is he physically taller than Jerry, even the line itself is a looking down on Jerry, right? Saying that, well, Gene and Scotty never have to worry. You do, you clown, but they don't.
Yeah. I will not take care of you. I will not help you. If you are dying in the street, I will step over you gladly because then I would never have to deal with you again. And Gene and Scotty would probably be much better off. That is what I see as the subtext to that line.
Yeah. And look, he probably helped Gene to break away from his control to a degree. So he probably feels, again, a bit of envy and jealousy and anger at Jerry for daring to come between him and his daughter, even though she is his husband and they've had a child. And we find out that Jerry is working at a dealership that his father-in-law owns. So Wade pretty much has Jerry's balls in his pocket, but it's still not enough. The level of control. He has to show up uninvited. He has to, essentially assume he's going to get dinner there. Like all these things that a gruff asshole of a dad would do, he does. And then to look down on Jerry the way he does, even though by all accounts, it seems like Jerry and her and Gene have a happy marriage. We don't see any kind of argument between them or no loss of love between them. Obviously Jerry later with the kidnapping, but like initially we think this is a happy family and he is just kind of lording over them.
Cut to a car just flying by on a 2-lane road in just snowy nowhere. And then you have this amazing shot of them driving in the vast expanse of nothingness with the horizon just right near the bottom of the frame. It's just a great, great shot. Yeah. And now we get our first little bit of dialogue between Gare and Carl. And Gare says,
"Where's Pancake's house?"
What?
"We stop at Pancake's house."
And when Stormar first did this line, he said, "Pancake House." And they went, cut. It's written as Pancake's house. He's like, yeah, but that's not right. He's like, yeah, I know. That's what you want you to say. And the Coen Brothers said, there are no typos in our scripts.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that.
And again, just with the simplicity, this whole scene is basically, it's just profile singles. It's like we're on one profile and we switch to the other. It's super, super simple.
What are you, nuts? We have pancakes for breakfast. Gotta go to a place where I can get a shot and a beer and steak, maybe. Not more fucking pancakes. Come on.
And then we're going to get what we get throughout this whole film, which is Buscemi talking and Stormar not responding.
And because when we were first introduced to them, right? They're sitting there at the table, and it's very clear that, they're in cahoots together. At least initially, you feel that way with Carl and Gare. But as we spend more time with Carl and Gare, there's clearly an issue between them in that Carl feels like Gare doesn't talk to him. So in Gare's own way, he's dismissing Carl as an important entity in his life because he won't even bother having a conversation with Carl. And so you see the dynamics of their relationship. He says, I want pancakes. That's it. I want pancakes. And Carl is trying to push back at him, like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do that. And it isn't until he offers him, as you're going to hear in a couple of seconds, like the ability to get laid and get the pancakes, that they come to some kind of conclusion through the whole situation that's going to avoid any kind of fight between them. But yeah, it's clear that Gare gets what he wants whenever he wants it. And Carl can bitch and moan and scream all he wants, but he eventually does give in to Gare because Gare is unmoved.
Yep. To be really fair, the offer of sex and pancakes is a very attractive offer.
I suppose, yes. Although I would never want to have sex after pancakes, but yes,
Well, you didn't see you had to have sex after the pancakes. You could have sex before the pancakes.
You have sex, work up an appetite.
Work up an appetite for pancakes.
Fair. Totally fair.
I'm curious because there's nothing explained of this in the movie at all.
Yeah.
What is your impression of how well Carl and Gare know each other? Have they worked together before? Have they known each other a long time? What is the history here?
Yeah, I think they have worked together a long time. I think this is the breaking point. The film itself is the breaking point of a lot of relationships, right? Jerry and Jean, when Jean gets kidnapped, Jerry and Wade with what happens there. Shep and Carl, there's the breaking point of their relationship. Carl and Gare there's a breaking point in their relationship. So the entire film, except for Marge and her husband, everyone else has these kind of every one of the main characters has this kind of breaking point in their respective relationships in the film. And so I think Carl and Gare have worked together numerous times before. It's just that Carl is sick of it now. He's come to the point where he's sick of how Gare gets to not say anything, gets to not speak to him, gets to not communicate with him, but then they always seem to do whatever Gare wants. So Carl is in a state in his life that's very similar to Wade's. They both want to break out of this situation where they feel the other person is more domineering and dominating of their lives, right? With Carl wanting to break away from Gare, in essence, and be respected as an equal. Jerry wants to be as respected as an equal by Wade. And so you see that, and both of them have hit their breaking point. And so I think that's why you see Carl just picking at Gare the whole time until Gare finally has enough and puts an axe to his face and tosses him into a wood chipper. So, it's an interesting situation to see how the comparison between these two relationships.
I hadn't thought about putting them together, to comparing them, but the more we're talking about that, the more interesting it becomes to me. It's so funny. There's no evidence of this. I'm not saying that I think that I know this is true, but my interpretation of their backstory is different, which is I think for some reason I think this is the first job they've done together, and I think for some reason they got paired together. Okay, and like, oh, this person is good at this person is good at this. All right, this will work out well, and then they are completely not matched well. And that the more Carl is insecure, the more he talks. And the more that Gare senses insecurity, the more he will be silent to make him more insecure. You know what I mean? Like that. Right. But I don't know. It totally could be that they've worked together for years and it's just breaking up, just as you say.
Well, what did Shep bring them together? Like, how did they get into Jerry's?
So Shep doesn't, but we'll get to the scene later. Yeah. But when Jerry mentions the two people to Shep, Shep says, I only recommended Gare. I don't know about any other person.
Right. So maybe it was Gare who brought Carl along, which is why I think they have worked together before. But, maybe it is the first time. And this was a guy that Gare met at a bar or whatever. And then he sensed that this guy was a bit of a criminal, a petty criminal, and was like, hey, there's a chance to make some money. You want to do this with me? But maybe Carl didn't know how much of an asshole Gare is because he doesn't talk to anybody.
Well, if anyone listening thinks they have a good theory of the backstory of this, please feel free to post it up for us on social media. We go to Gustafson Motors classic shots of a car dealership. I love when they go to the sales board and they push in on that picture of Jerry's picture, and just that big smiling face is so great.
Yeah.
And we go into his office in the little fucking room at the car dealership, where the car dealer is now going to lie to you or up the price. And that is exactly the scene we're in the middle of.
We sat right here in this room and went over this and over this.
Yeah, but that true code.
I sat right here and said I didn't want any true code.
Have you had dealers pull these things on you?
Are you kidding? Fuck yeah, every single time. I mean, I don't know if I've said this before on the show, but when I was younger, I thought, of course, because I was a teenager, I thought I knew more about cars than my dad. I thought, well, my dad's an immigrant. What does he know about negotiating rates on a car? I'm going to go do it. And I told my dad to be quiet, let me do it while I was there as a teenager. I think I was 19 years old or 18 years old, buying my own car. And my dad was like, no, they're screwing you over. They're this and this and this. And I wouldn't listen to my dad. And I ended up paying 16% interest on a car loan.
Oh, Jesus.
Without thinking, well, the dealers, they wouldn't lie to you, Dad. This stuff is important for the car. I want the car to last a long time. And I had no idea. When I found out about it a year or two later, and when I was a little bit older, grew up and read some stuff and realized how much they had effed me over, I went to my father and apologized, on my hands and knees, figuratively, about it. And since that time, every single time I walk into a dealership, I have fucking just a stack of papers or a huge binder of notes, and I go through everything with them. And I just assume they're all a bunch of fucking liars, and I want to put them through hell on earth before I get my price. So everyone else is paying for what they did to me, but all those things that you see going on here with Jerry and that irate customer, who is played by Gary Houston, who's worked in a number of things, including the film Watchmen, is fantastic and very believable. And I love that he gets so irate. You people, you tell me one thing, you drag me out here, and it's like, yeah, okay, the true code's important though. That kind of stuff, they run all those scams on you, and it is tough when you realize how much of those scams they run on people and how sad these car salespeople are, because they try to screw you over to get a little more money in their pockets in terms of commission.
It's so painful and funny, this scene to watch, because we've been there. We understand exactly what's happening, and you're watching Jerry trying to manipulate him, and this guy goes,
You called me 20 minutes ago and said you had it ready to make delivery. It says, come on down and get it. And here you are, and you're wasting my time and my wife's time, and I'm paying $19,500 for this vehicle here.
And Jerry just so reluctantly, and it's so obvious that he feels for the guy and for his plight, says,
all right, I'll talk to my boss. See, they install that true code at the factory. There's nothing we can do, but I'll talk to my boss.
They say all that bullshit. Meanwhile, his boss, as we see in the next sequence, is sitting there watching the Gophers playing golf as he's eating his lunch, because that's what they do. They're bullshitting you when they say they got to go talk to the general manager or whatever.
He just stands there, asks for a ticket, and it just even in that moment when he says, hey, you got an extra ticket to the game, and the guy's like, you kidding? Because he doesn't want to go anywhere with Jerry. Yeah, nobody likes Jerry.
Or the fact that it's sold out. Like the idea that you would think there would be a ticket available is so stupid in classic Jerry, Yeah.
And so we know that he hasn't spoken to a boss or made any change, but now he comes back into sales and says,
he never done this before, but seeing as it's special circumstances and all, he says I can knock $100 off that true code.
And the guy, his performance is so great. I could totally see you loving to do this kind of a role.
Oh, yeah.
100. You lied to me, Mr. Lundgaard. You're a bald-faced liar. A fucking liar.
And his wife tries to calm him down, which is such a great move. Oh.
And you could tell he has not. He's probably sworn 3 times in his life.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and I think I saw some interview with the Coen Brothers talked about that scene is kind of reflective of this Minnesota nice, that they're nice, but then when you cross that line or whatever, that's when the tiger comes out, and you're seeing that clearly with this guy. The fact that he even cusses at Jerry in this way, and and again, William H. Macy, what an incredible performance here. The sheepish, looking down at the ground. He's ashamed that he has to do this kind of stuff in order to make some level of money. Or he is a sociopath, as you said, Steve, and he just plays the ashamed guy because that's what he's learned in order to function in the world. If he plays this kind of sad, pathetic guy, people will give him money. People will pay the price extra, and he'll make that commission down the road. So yeah, it's give me my checkbook.
Exactly, because it works in the end. And I'm totally guilty of you were probably tougher in these situations than me based on your story about how you go into a car dealership.
I love it.
Because I'm in the end, I'm like this guy. I'm like, fine, where's my checkbook?
You break my heart. You break my heart. I hate it that they would take advantage of people like you in this way. I mean, we negotiated for a month and a half to get the car we have now.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, we went to 5 dealerships because they tried to fuck us in 3 of them. And it wasn't until the 5th one that we got it all the way down. And even there, I almost walked out. I was real close. But in the end, I was like, I looked at all the numbers, looked at all the stuff online and everything like that, and was like, okay, this is probably the best we're going to get, and made the deal. And those people have never checked in on us. They've never called us. They didn't do anything. You know why? Because we probably took a lot of money off of them that they would have normally made on a sale like that. So that's the game. You know, I don't mind being the asshole. I negotiated her lease the first time around as well, when those pricks at Nissan tried to screw her over. So, you know, I love it. She hates it. I relish it. I'm like, call me in, coach. I would love to do it professionally. I would love to go in dealerships professionally, get paid, make 6 figures, negotiating better deals for people so they can get a good deal and not be owned by these car companies and the bullshit they pull, you know?
I was told that my uncle Russell, who, you know, is a realtor and a successful businessman, that he has actually made car dealers cry because he was made such a, I literally, and this is true, I literally almost flew him to Los Angeles to say, hey, can you just negotiate? It'd be totally worth the flight, the price of the flight to just go, come on. It's like, okay, now I'm going to bring in my negotiator, Russell Morris. Will you please go in and talk to this? And I'll just step outside.
I tell you this, one of Shannon McClung's friends from the Geek Buddies, his name is Blake Johnson. He's a former car salesman. I talked to him about all this stuff, and he's like, "You're 100% right." He likes to go in to negotiate deals for his friends because he knows every trick the salesmen are going to pull and calls them out on it and gets them great deals. So yeah, I love this stuff. Vengeance. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
I think this healthily activates your vengeance gene.
Yes.
This is a way that your vengeance gene is working for you, and my lack of that gene is not helping me at all. So the other thing I want to point out is okay, here's this story where he's manipulating and lying to people to get them to pay more money than they should have so that he can profit. Yep. What is he doing in the main plot of the movie? 100%. He has told Gerg and Carl that they're going to get $40,000 out of a total of $80,000, and he is going to ask for $1 million from Wade to pay the ransom.
Yep. I guarantee you that he wasn't even going to pay them the 40, and he would have found a way to kill both of them. I guarantee you.
I don't know. I think he's totally ineffectual physically. So I don't think I can't imagine that he would kill them. But you might be right.
Them. Not fight them physically in any way, shape, or form. I think he might do something dirty to shoot them so he wouldn't have to pay. Because those people would lead back to him, which eventually does happen, you know.
Right. By the way, when we're shooting in winter, the days are shorter than when you're shooting in summer. And the farther north you are, the shorter those days are. So the days were very, very short when they're shooting this. And it was really important to them that they wanted the freeway outside the window behind Jerry as they're shooting this scene in his office. And that's something you see multiple times. It's just the winter life going on outside of windows where we're sitting. They do that a lot in this film. Unfortunately, they shot that way to get all of Jerry's stuff. And by the time they finish, because the days are so short, it is now dark. So when they turned around to shoot all the couple sitting in the opposite direction, that is all lit by lights. They're faking daylight everywhere. And of course, because it's Roger Deakins, no one would ever notice because he does it all perfectly.
Right.
We fade to the road and we see a sign that says, "Welcome to Brainerd, home of Paul Bunyan." And we drive by that statue of Paul Bunyan. Do you know that there is controversy about where Paul Bunyan comes from? There are multiple towns in the Midwest that claim that they are in fact the home of Paul Bunyan. And I have been to one of them, which is Bemidji, Minnesota, also claims to be the hometown of Paul Bunyan.
But isn't Paul Bunyan fake?
He is fake.
Okay.
Yes.
So how can you?
Where did the myth originate is the question.
Oh, really? You want to lay claim to that? So interesting.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then we cut to, I don't know if this was pre-sex pancakes or post-sex pancakes, but we do cut to the two guys having sex in beds next to each other in a motel room, which just really doesn't seem like fun to me at all.
I have done this. When I graduated from basic training, me and my boy, I'm not going to say his name, because it was a co-ed basic training, we hooked up with two of the girls, and we didn't have enough money to get 2 hotel rooms. So we got 1 hotel room with another friend of ours. And me and my friend had sex with her and her friend while our other friend sat in a chair watching TV. So it was an interesting experience. And when you're young in the military, these are the crazy things that you do when you pull. But it was a great night. It was a great night. So
Well, there
I
you
have
go.
done this, but it was a great night. Yeah.
Were there pancakes involved?
There were no pancakes involved till the next morning when I went out with my buddy to go get some food at the diner for sure. But no, not with them.
Did you have a moment like Garrick and Carl of sitting watching the Tonight Show with the prostitutes? It's just, there's something about that shot after that is so ordinary and kind of sad,
It's sad. Yeah. No, we did not do that because we had all just graduated basic training, so we knew we were going on to AIT. But we did just kind of sit around afterwards, having fun conversations until they left. But no, there was not sad watching of the Tonight Show, which I think is great in the movie.
We cut to back to the Lundegaard house with Gene cooking and Scotty, eating some breakfast and watching TV, and we're having just your totally normal parental discussion about his grades and the hockey team and whether or not he can be on it. And then I love the moment where Scotty, who's still upset about the hockey thing, says,
"Look, Dad, there's no fucking way that
Scotty.
Hey, let's watch that language there.
and the reaction to him swearing is huge.
He's like, language.
Yeah. But then what we hear on the phone is that Stan Grossman, the great Stan Grossman, looked at the proposal. He says it's pretty sweet.
No kidding. I need the cash pretty quick there in order to close the deal.
Come by at 2:30, we'll talk about it.
And so we're going to set up a meeting with Stan Grossman about this big deal at 2:30.
Yeah.
We're in the service garage of the car dealership, and Jerry's walking through, and he goes up to find Shep Proudfoot, who's played by Steve Rivas.
Yeah, Steve Rivas was a Native American actor. He's Blackfoot. He had roles in Last of the Dogman Dances with Wolves. He was born in 1962 in Browning, Montana. He grew up on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation there in northwestern Montana. He attended and graduated Flandreau High School. And then he attended Haskell Indian Junior College in Lawrence, Kansas, where he received an Associate of Arts degree. His first film was the 1987 film War Party. Then he was in Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. Then he was in Dances with Wolves. He was Chato, the Apache Scout in Geronimo, an American legend. He was Yellow Wolf in Last of the Dogman with Tom Berenger and Barbara Hershey. He received awards for his roles in both movies by First Americans in the Arts. I didn't know that Native Americans have awards for these kinds of things. I thought it was amazing. And was honored again in 2004 for his work on the ABC series Line of Fire. And he was in The Missing and the remake of The Longest Yard and the TNT miniseries Into the West. So worked a lot, but also sadly passed away at the age of 54. So
oh wow,
he's unsettling in the film.
He really is,
right?
Well, it's what's so funny. It's just occurred to me, and I don't even know if I can figure out how to say it or if this is even going to make sense. But he's a perfect example of the fact that in Coen Brothers movies, they don't write ordinary people. Every single person is a character.
Yeah.
And I know it's like, well, of course, everybody in a movie is a character, and every writer wants to write interesting characters in their movies. Right. That's totally true. But there's something about every single person in a Coen Brothers movie that is so uniquely, specifically, they're not ordinary people. They're not just people. They are characters. And Shep, his brooding, quiet, solid, dangerous, stubbornness of him, is definitely, and the other thing too about quote unquote characters, every tone, every vocal, and like if you listen to the voices of each of these characters, instantly that's a different person,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And with Shep, the way this actor Steve Rivas like uses the Native American accent and how he speaks, and then the deep voice of how he speaks very clearly, very concisely, that's why he's friends with Gare. I bet those guys have gone out on a night of beers and not said one word to each other for like an hour or 2 hours, yet completely enjoyed the night and completely enjoyed each other's company,
Yeah, that is probably not a party I want to be at.
Not in any way, shape, or form.
So, and Jerry's here because he might get this money through this deal with Stan Grossman and Wade, and he might not even have to do the kidnapping, so he wants to call it off.
Say, those two fellas you put me in touch with up there in Fargo?
Put you in touch with Grimsrud.
Yeah, well, he had a buddy there. I
don't vouch for him.
Well, that's okay.
I vouch for Grimsrud. Who's his buddy?
Carl something.
Never heard of him. Don't vouch for him.
So this is this weird, and I think this is a very serious thing for Shep.
Yeah.
That I vouch for one person. I don't know who this other person is.
We've seen this in a number of shows or movies, right? That people go like, well, I only vouch for this person. Or, when they talk about people going undercover, who's going to vouch for me to prove that I served in these prisons or did all these things. So the vouching is a very big deal, it seems like, from how it's portrayed in the movies, in the criminal underworld. Who you vouch for, because it can lead back to you and you can lose your rep as someone who can be trusted to vouch for people, or whose vouching of people is not trustworthy,
I am always very careful about the criminals I vouch for. I
try not to vouch for any criminals myself. Yes.
Well, unless you know they're the really good ones. I mean, you don't have my contacts, obviously.
Right.
Gotta get in touch with him. See, this deal I needed him for, I may not need it anymore. Something's happening, see?
Call him up?
Yeah, well, see, I did that. And I haven't been able to get him, so I thought maybe you'd know an alternate number or what have you.
Nope.
And there's this moment where someone else is there and he just awkwardly has to now shuffle away.
Yeah.
Then we cut to Garrick and Carl driving on the car, and you might notice that they're driving in front of like a concrete background on the freeway, that it's just concrete there. Well, the reason they're driving in front of concrete is because there was no snow. Everywhere they went that had like an open vista, you could see that it was totally snowless. And so the only place they could figure out to shoot this was in front of this concrete freeway wall. And so all they did was they drove back and forth in front of this one section in order to get this whole shoot done.
It's proven that secondhand smoke is carcinogen, cancer agent.
And as happens many, many times, he just gives him a look. No responses. And you really can't pick anyone better than Steve Buscemi to have someone spinning out because the other person is giving them the silent treatment,
Yeah, he does that really well. And he's picking, because it's all from the fact that this guy being so silent, this guy not engaging in conversation with him, makes him feel smaller, makes him feel lesser than. So in some ham-handed way to take control or to feel manly, he's going to try to, in essence, passive-aggressively guilt this guy into talking to him. So he's jabbing at him throughout this whole... He jabs at him throughout the whole movie, but it's every time when they're together, it's all about the fact that he feels like this guy is emasculating him because he doesn't talk to him and doesn't think he's worthy of being spoken to. Instead of accepting Garrett for who he is and how he possibly views him, he's trying to push Garrett into a reaction in order to feel like he's getting something from him, even though Garrett doesn't want to give it to him.
It's such a weird thing of he can't abide the silence. He just can't sit in the silence. And look, I suffer from this. If we're sitting for a long time and nobody's talking, I will introduce a topic. You know what I mean? So I definitely suffer that. Have I ever told you, by the way, Hoover, who I've told many, many stories about, one of his techniques was he would sometimes ask a question,
Mhm.
and if he wasn't satisfied with your answer, he would literally just stare you unblinking in the eyes. And I would watch, and it worked on me, it worked on all sorts of people. You watch so many people squirm because they'll say like, "Oh, so what's your dad do?" And you'll go like, "Oh, my dad is an optometrist." And he goes, and then he just stares at you for a while.
Yeah.
And then you go, "Well, I mean, my dad and I were never close." And then he's still staring at you, and you're just like, "Well, the thing that was happening with my dad." And suddenly, you're just saying all this stuff because you can't deal with the silence.
Right.
And Steve Buscemi, man, he's just like, first he talks about Chicago architecture, nothing.
Would it kill you to say something?
I did.
No. It's the first thing you've said in the last 4 hours. That's a fountain of conversation, man. That's a geyser. I mean, whoa, Daddy, stand back, man.
And what is his response? Silence.
They're like a toxic couple, right?
Totally.
Like a relationship. And clearly one is like, why won't you talk to me? Why won't you tell me your feelings? Why won't you? And trying to bring up subjects and bring up topics. And the other one is clearly so disinterested in everything and just wants to get it clearly, well, at least to me, it seems clear, just wants to get through the job with as little talking as possible. You know,
I think so too. I think he also is enjoying watching Carl squirm.
Yeah, probably
under all this. Yeah. And I love he makes the strong move, the bold statement.
Oh, fuck it. I don't have to talk either, man. See how you like it.
And there's pause. And then he can last about, I don't know, 4 seconds and then goes.
Just total fucking silence. Two could play at that game, smart guy. We'll just see how you like it. Total silence.
Total silence. Cut to Jerry back in his office on the phone with Riley Diefenbach from the GMAC. They're having this conversation, and he's asking about some finance documents. And at first, we're going like, "Well, what's all this about? Like, what's going on?" And what we hear is that there's some sort of loan in place that I guess the corporate offices have loaned this dealership money.
Yes,
and using certain cars on the lot as collateral. And we hear that it was $320,000. But the guy doesn't have the VIN numbers on the cars.
Right. Not all of them are accurate.
Yeah, but the deal's already done. I already got the money.
Yes, we have an audit here. I just have to know that these vehicles you're financing with this money, that they really exist.
Yeah, well, they exist, all right.
No, I'm sure they do.
What's going on here, John?
He's got multiple schemes going on. The scheme with the wife, the scheme with the lot, which is a little more business, a little more above board, shall we say. And then this scheme that he's pulling with the company, I guess, and the numbers of cars that are supposed to be there. And I imagine he like rubbed out it's obviously the Cutlass Sierra, right? That's one.
That's one of them.
The other ones I think all line up, but it's the Cutlass Sierra one that is maybe he's messed with the VIN numbers. And the guy's just saying, well, there's some numbers that don't match. He's trying to be like a little more open about it, or a little more like less accusatory, shall we say. And so I think Jerry is trying to hold them off until he can figure out this whole situation, get that $750,000 from Wade for that lot. I don't even know if he's going to buy the lot, to be honest with you. I don't even know if that thing's for sale, right? Oh, there's a whole bunch of this stuff that, again, if you watch this movie without believing a word that Jerry says, it makes it all the more, to me, believable that this is the kind of person that he is. So nothing I think he's saying has any truth to it. There's very real possibility, Steve, that it's more than just the Cutlass Sierra. But for right now, at this point in the film, I'm thinking, well, it's just the Cutlass Sierra. He's probably fudged the N into a 7 or something, or messed the numbers up so they don't 100% line up. So he's trying to get that money. So this guy is in deep for 6 figures, like I said, or he wouldn't be pulling all these schemes to try to get ahead money-wise and pay rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. And so that's what I think is happening here. What about you?
I think it's actually worse than you're describing.
Oh,
I actually
okay.
think, I think so. We're talking about $320,000 was loaned to this car lot.
Yes,
using these cars as collateral. I actually think that he has embezzled that much money from the car lot. I don't think it's just the Cutlass Sierra. I think that it's actually a whole bunch of cars that he has actually sold and now is claiming to corporate that they're still on the lot and using them on collateral when they're not, which is why he has to fudge the VIN numbers. It might not be exactly that.
Yeah, because I mean, if you sell the car, you've got to put the VIN number on the paperwork. So
right, and so that's what. Yeah, well,
yeah,
I will lay out how I think this scheme worked.
Okay.
So he sold 10 cars.
Yes.
Okay, worth $320,000. Then he claimed that these cars are still on the lot. Wrote out the VIN numbers on the fax and smudged them all. So he made basically a shitty looking fax.
Right.
So there are no car numbers on the VIN number because they're all gone. And so, and what he's doing is he's floating this long enough for him to have his wife kidnapped or the deal to come through with the lot, which will give him enough money to pay off the corporate debt before they circle back to find out that the cars weren't real that he made the loan under. Otherwise, he's going to jail.
Okay.
That's how I see what's going on here.
Okay. I can kind of see that. Yeah. Because I was confused on the fact that if he sold the car, he would have to put the VIN number on those documents of selling the car,
which he did. I'm sure he did
into corporate. But you're saying he put the VIN numbers on there, but the VIN numbers were wrong or smudged or whatever.
Smudged, yeah,
on a number of them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, I don't really know. I don't know exactly what's going on.
That's the great mystery of the movie is that we never do really find out why he needs the money. We have no idea why he needs the money. It's just guessing at this point.
But I think what both of us agree on is that not only is he regularly scamming clients who come in to buy cars, but he is actually scamming the lot and scamming corporate on some level.
Right.
And taking money probably out of his family and other stuff. Like he's put himself in a deep hole somehow.
Right.
And is scrambling in multiple ways to set it right.
And you have to ask yourself why. Like, this guy could have lived a very easy existence, right? Yeah. I mean, if he could have dealt with Wade's overbearing, domineering ways, he had a lovely wife, he had a good-looking young son, he had a secure job for the rest of his life. All he had to do was kiss Wade's ass till he died of a heart attack and inherited all that money. But instead, he just got himself in this situation, and now he's completely fucking up his life by pulling all these schemes. And so that's the real tragedy of this. If he had just lived a quiet life that he had married into, he'd have been fine. But maybe his grifter heart couldn't stop. Like it had to, not only to convince a man's daughter to marry him, he also now needs to get more and more of that money because he has these visions. I think he has a vision that he's going to take off to like the Bahamas or Jamaica and live there for the rest of his life, where he can't be extradited and live off that money and never see Wade or his wife or his kid ever again. I don't think he cares about anybody in this movie, you know?
I also think, and this is not me being sympathetic towards Jerry, who's clearly a terrible person, but I also think he suffered from the difficulty of being rich adjacent, which is, it's not easy. I don't think Wade has, helped out his family with his wealth. I think they've been living on Jerry's shitty commissions off of the car sales.
Right.
But he's next to Wade, who's like the wealthiest guy in town.
Right.
And I think he's jealous and wants to live that kind of lifestyle.
Without earning it.
Without earning it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, I don't know. Being Wade's son-in-law, you're earning it a little bit, in my opinion. But
maybe. You married into it. Nobody forced you to.
That's a fair point.
It's an interesting scene, and I saw some people comment in doing some research for this that the vertical blinds in his office are open to simulate like he's in a jail cell. So it's a bit of foreshadowing the way it's from. Now, I don't know if the Coens intended to do that, but I've seen some people speculate that. And I went back when I was doing the rewatch. I paused the scene like I was like, I could see how you could see. I never got that. But I could see how you could see it that way, which I think is an interesting thing to think about as well as this is going on.
Well, I definitely know that they wanted daylight and to see out into the world. That was something they were definitely focusing on. So maybe that makes sense that they were thinking that visually as well.
Yeah, because he's kind of in a jail cell in that office, in that job. And everyone else is moving on with their lives outside his window, and he is stuck here, So maybe in some way that's a symbolic usage of it.
You know how we've talked about that Tom Cruise is the best runner? Nobody runs like Tom Cruise. Nobody takes a punch like Harrison Ford or like Mel Gibson. But I don't think anybody is embarrassingly awkward like William H. Macy.
Yeah, it's a skill.
he's like the master of all. You can see all the wheels turning, how he's trying to scramble. And I love at the end of the scene when we've already said that the problem was the fax.
Yeah.
That he's trying to get off the phone and he goes,
Yeah, okay, no problem. I'll just fax that right over to you.
No, fax it.
I mean, send it over. I'll shoot it right over to you then.
Okay, fine.
Okay, real good then.
Makes you wonder if you could have been a fly on the wall when him and Felicity Huffman got in trouble for what they did for their daughter. I mean, would the real William H. Macy have been? Well, no, she graduated. She did those courses. She was a rower.
She definitely rode.
She totally rode. I mean, I can show you the video, and it's like, I can't see her face. That's her though. That's her. That kind of stuff. I don't know.
But by the way, there is a very good podcast, Malcolm Gladwell, breaking down that that event and looking at it from, and it's what's really interesting about it, not that what the stars did to get their kids into these schools was right, which it obviously wasn't, but all of the insanity of the university system and admission system that they all know that this is going on.
Oh, of course.
And the scam, it's a scam coming from the university,
If people really knew how much scamming is going on in our entire country and every institution we have, I really think we'd lose faith in everything, like honestly, because human beings are imperfect people. And unfortunately, and I'm not trying to create don't believe anybody. It's more a matter of this is just what happens. And when money's involved, the scamming and the looking the other way happens all the time. People just are stupid. When they're stupid enough to get caught, you had to do it really badly. Really badly. Yeah.
Those ones were really bad.
Yeah, they were.
It's like, what the hell are you thinking? It's so funny. I'm actually so glad you brought this up because it's everything Jerry is doing.
Yes.
It's all of these stupid things that he thinks he can somehow outsmart people and get away with stuff that there's no way you can get away with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we've gotten to the actual crime because we cut to Jean, who is sitting and knitting in their home, watching a morning show. And again, the Coen Brothers are so good at just making this look so normal. This is just normal, everyday life. And the way this happens, I just love, which is she's sitting watching TV and then she hears something and she sees this guy with a mask coming up the stairs and a crowbar in his hands. And rather than freak out at that moment, she just kind of stares, which I get because it's so bizarre.
It's so bizarre, and she has no idea what's going on. Well, she's watching a TV show, so seeing something happening right outside of her home, it's almost like, in a way, it's an extension of the morning show. This is what happens when this is like footage of someone breaking into the house. And so in her mind, as she's watching it, she does such a great job here of looking at it with bewilderment. What is happening here until they shatter the window? Then it becomes a reality, right?
And her reaction is fantastic. And the other guy comes in through the door. He grabs her. She kicks and screams, bites him. He finally lets go. And now Stormar is just interested in his wound on his hand at this point. That's all he's concerned about at this moment.
Right, yeah.
She rushes into the bathroom. By the way, so the bathroom, they really wanted to shoot on location. They didn't want to go off and shoot on a set and have to build something. But the house that they were shooting at just didn't have a bathroom with an exterior window that worked the way they wanted to work. So what did they do? They just built a room outside of the actual house and added it on. So it's just, they just built this set connected to the house. So they're still at the same location, but this is actually on a set. And I love the way they do this because she goes into the bathroom with the phone on the line and she pulls it out. She starts to dial and the whole phone gets yanked out of her hand by the cable and slides over to the door. And then they start breaking in through the door. Yeah. Perfect storytelling because she sees them coming in through the door. She looks to the window and then they break through the door and we see the window open. So naturally she must have gone out the window.
Right.
So Buscemi runs downstairs to go find her outside. Stormar is totally distracted, looks at the medicine cabinet, trying to find some medicine for his bite.
Yeah.
And then in the mirror of the medicine cabinet, he sees the closed shower curtain, stares at it for a moment, and then she comes out of that screaming because she had hidden there, runs down the hall, her face covered by the shower curtain.
Yeah.
And goes down the stairs, falls down the stairs. And the thing is, It is horrendous what is happening to this woman.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
Sad. It's so sad and funny. Yes, exactly. It's funny. You're laughing, but you're also experiencing a sense of dread, right? And sympathy and pity for what she's going through because, again, she is an unwitting victim. She's not involved in any of this stuff. All she's done is love her husband and try to be a good mom. Scotty, we see this potential. You're just wasting your potential. Like she's a regular mom who just wants her son to do well and wants to support her husband and cooks for everyone, the dinner and everything. So her experience in this, and there's a cruel irony, Steve, which I think is great writing, that the only reason she gets found in the shower is because she bit his hand and he wanted some medicine for his hand and he was looking through the medicine cabinet.
Right.
He might have followed Buscemi down the stairs outside. She might have been able to hide a little bit longer in the house or make that call to 911 because they yanked the phone out of her hand through the telephone line under the door. So she might have been able to make that 911 call while they were outside trying to find her and she could have gotten away or she could have gotten saved. But because she bit him unknowingly, it led to her getting caught there by Garrett and Carl. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you point this out because it's the underlying upset about this movie is what's so weird about it is there are a bunch of innocent victims that die.
Yes.
And we don't really spend any time with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, this is the one that we spend the most time with. And it is so, because the more you think about it, she's like, oh, it's everything you just said. She's a nice lady. She doesn't even get the satisfaction of knowing that her husband was involved or what happened or that Jerry embezzled money or anything.
Yeah.
She just, a random dude breaks through her window, chases her. She falls down the stairs. Then she's in a car. And then later on, she's going to get killed,
Yeah.
It's so upsetting.
By the time it's all over, Scotty, I think has lost both of his parents.
Yep.
And that's a real shame. And there's
his grandfather.
Sequel, some of that. And grandfather, right. There's a sequel in all of that, I think. He probably inherits all the money. So does he repeat the pattern here? Does he now become a Wade in the town with all that money? I wonder.
Well, and he gets the pleasure of being raised by his version of Mr. Thatcher from Citizen Kane because I think Stan Grossman is going to have to raise Scotty.
Yes, 100%. Right, until Scotty turns 18 or 21 or whatever's in. Because Wade's will totally has that.
Yeah.
You don't get anything until he turns 18. If he gets a real job, then 21, fine.
Jerry walks into this office smiling. He seems like he's at least trying to put out that he's in a good mood. And by the way, do you remember at the beginning, we talked about the fact that they were shooting something else and then it started snowing and then they had to send out a crew to shoot that opening shot with the car towing the other car. Well, this is what they're shooting. They were shooting this scene and they couldn't leave it. So Roger Deakins and the Coen Brothers stayed on the scene. And this is, if you look out the window, it is actually snowing out, which it isn't for most of the movie.
Right.
How you doing, Wade? Good to see you again, Jerry. These numbers are right. This looks pretty sweet.
Oh, those numbers are right, all right.
And they say congratulations to Jerry. And we kind of have this moment that we think everything's going to go his way. Mm-hmm. And then they say,
what kind of finder's fee are you looking for?
Oof.
And Jerry is totally taken aback.
I mean, he did not think that this was a question that would pop up. I mean, Jerry, who likes to pride himself, at least with all these schemes that he's doing, that he thinks he's going to outsmart all these people. In this moment, he didn't think Wade would be cheap enough to ice him out of the deal and just pay him a finder's fee. It's really shocking. It's really shocking.
I don't know. I'm a little bit team Stan and Wade on this one.
Oh, I'm not choosing sides. I'm saying that I think it's shocking that he was stupid to not think that Wade would try to do that with Stan.
Yeah. I his whole, because his notion, because he's shocked. He's totally shocked.
100% he's shocked.
No, but Wade, see, I was bringing you this deal for you to loan me the money to put in. It's my deal here, see?
Jerry, we thought you were bringing us an investment.
Yeah, right.
This entire scene is fantastic. And again, this film is so amazing. If you were to go, and we're going scene by scene, but if you were to really deconstruct every scene in this movie, it's a phenomenal approach to a film. I can understand why people think this is, I think I've seen some critics say this is the perfect movie, right? Just the writing and the way. But even this whole scene, the way he walks in, Stan is sitting comfortably facing the door. Wade is behind his desk looking out. They do not turn any of the couches to face the desk so that Jerry can sit comfortably and talk about the deal. And you see Jerry turn around and he's just like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just sit on the arm of this chair. That already is an indication of how little they respect Jerry, that they don't even bother pulling out a chair for him or turning a chair around so he can feel comfortable. Even though this is a pretty big deal of $750,000, this whole lot and everything like that, they still don't respect him. And then this whole sequence where Jerry gets surprised by the finder's fee situation, Stan and Wade look at each other like, we're not just going to give you $750,000. What were you thinking? They're almost looking at like Stan does it from a place of almost pity. Wade is more like, are you stupid? We're not a bank, this whole thing. And you can see it very clearly that Jerry did not really think this thing through because he's so inexperienced at playing at this level of money and this level of financing. And it's so obvious. And he looks so pathetic here as Stan and Wade are both just like, what did you think was going to happen here? And it's a phenomenal scene. And Jerry is just super pissed. And then the ultimate fuck you is them going, well, if you're not going to take a finder's fee and you're not going to be able to raise the money independently, you mind if we do it without you? And so it's like, what a massive fuck you at the end,
Well, and I also think what's so interesting is those moments where Jerry is revealing little pieces about what's actually going on.
No. See, I don't need a finder's fee. I need finder's fees. What, 10%? Heck, that's not going to do it for me. I need the principal.
That's not going to do it for me. Yeah. I need the principal is exactly what we were talking about before. Yeah. There is some debt that he has that he's got to deal with, and it's not all going to the lot.
What's 10? It's
75 grand would be
75 grand. The fact that 75 grand is not going to get him out of his situation tells you how deep he is in the hole money wise. Yeah.
Well, Jerry, we're not going to just give you $750,000.
What the heck were you thinking? If I'm only getting bank interest, I want complete security. Heck, FDIC. I don't see nothing like that here.
It's like if Wade weren't such a prick. This sounds like a project that maybe needs a manager, and maybe it's not just a finder's fee, but it's like, Jerry, you're going to manage this investment, but it's our investment, not your investment.
Right.
Because business-wise, I do agree with Stan and Wade that it doesn't make sense for them to loan this guy this much money just so he can make it. They can make the investment themselves. Why would they just loan him the money to make the investment they can make?
Jerry works for him at his car lot that Wade owns. Why would Wade give him $750,000 to go? It just doesn't make any sense. And Jerry clearly thought he could hoodwink them into this situation, and now everything's blown up in his face because he's a fool.
Yeah, and the moment it ends, as you said, with them saying they're going to go move on it on their own.
Yeah,
and it's funny. The thought that I have watching this is like, well, his other plan for getting money is also in the works now. So I guess. He can't. The reason he was hoping to stop the kidnapping was because he thought this deal was going through, but this deal is not going through.
Yeah.
And then we cut to, I mentioned this at the very beginning, this idea of ambiguous space, a shot where you don't quite understand what you're looking at, and then it reveals itself to you in the next moment. And this, whenever I think of the concept of ambiguous space, it is this shot I think of, which is we're in this amazing top-down shot of the snowy parking lot. And I can remember seeing it in the theater, and I can remember when it first came on, and I literally am like, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And then when Jerry walks into the frame and it's like everything solidifies and you go like, oh, I understand.
Right.
It's an amazing shot. By the way, they were going to initially have more cars on the lot.
Yeah.
But then when they were getting set up and all of this snow is manufactured snow because it's not snowing. And so they're out all night, long time with a snow machine to put snow down, and then they were about to move in all the extra cars, and Roger Deakins is looking at it and is like, nope, stop right here.
Yeah,
this is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and it's perfect, because this is Jerry walking out into this frozen winterland alone, and in that car all by itself. And I think the snow has fallen on, or no, I guess it hasn't, but the parking lot himself. This is a window into his actual soul, into his actual. He is all by himself in this frozen winterland. It's genius.
He gets in the car, exhales, sits for a moment, and then realizes there's ice on the windshield. And it's all in one shot. And William H. Macy is so great. He gets out, he grabs his ice scraper, and he starts kind of slowly, methodically working on the window, and then with more intensity, and then goes into full freak out, hits the glass, yells, throws down the ice scraper.
Yeah.
And then what I love and what makes it such a great scene, that is amazing, and Bill Macy is fantastic in it. But it's the walking back to the ice scraper and picking it up and methodically starting again because he has to scrape the ice off his windshield. You have to go back, and I'm sure you've had this moment where you're just like, motherfucker, God damn it. And now you got to clean up whatever the fucking thing is because you're an adult and you have to deal with that shit, you know?
Yeah, both of those things. I've had those moments of frustration and then moments of like, okay, I got to go back and get this and finish the job because this is my life, you know? And so, And look, I know some people feel sympathy for Jerry. This is a moment where you could maybe feel sympathy for Jerry because it's clear how emasculated he is by Wade. Yet again, again in his life, Wade and Stan by extension have emasculated him, and so it's heartbreaking, you know, in some ways.
I do feel sympathy for Jerry. I know I shouldn't. You know, he's a terrible person.
I agree.
But in the moments where he's being demeaned by Wade, and in moments like this. He's such a sad sack.
Yeah.
And and I think this is the remarkable thing about movies that people just it's not just like, I like the good people and I don't like the bad people. Movies can make you feel all sorts of stuff that are unexpected. And that's sympathy for Jerry is one of them, you know?
Yeah.
By the way, Roger Deakins was blown away by William H. Macy in this scene.
Sure.
We're back at the house. He walks in just like he did before with some groceries, yells,
"Hon, got the groceries."
And then he walks up to the bathroom, still holding those groceries, sees the mess, sees the open window, the broken shower curtain. And then while he's looking at the broken shower curtain, we hear the audio from the next scene.
"Wade, it's Jerry. I don't know what to do. It's Gene."
And then he repeats himself.
"Yeah, Wade, it's Jerry."
And he's saying the same thing.
"Wade, it's Jerry. We gotta talk. It's something hard, geez. It's terrible."
And we start to realize, like, oh, he's practicing his lines.
It's great to fool us for a moment. But I wonder, do you think he knew? Or do you think he was just coming home every day, saying her name, wondering if this was the day she got kidnapped? Or did he know that she was going to get kidnapped on this day? Because why would he yell out her name? Scotty's not home.
I don't think he knew that exactly when she was going to get kidnapped.
Right.
I also think Jerry is such an idiot. And I don't really have any evidence of this, but my feeling is at the moment that he walked in the door, he was so focused on losing the deal with Wade and Stan for the property that he had actually entirely forgotten about the kidnapping plot at the moment he walked in the door.
Yes.
That's my feeling.
That's a great point. Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, because he had tried to call it off, remember, earlier in... So, he didn't even think that. Yeah, good point.
Well, I think one of the Jerry's fatal flaws is he doesn't really understand the reality of various situations.
No.
He lives in a little bit of a fantasy world, a fantasy world where they're just going to hand him $750,000, a fantasy world where he can get a loan from corporate without providing the VIN numbers on the cars, and a fantasy world that he could just, I'm just going to, because I actually think he fully expected to get his wife back. And that everything, no one would ever find out, and everything 100%. Would be totally fine, and he would never be held responsible. And he'd be a hero,
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Wade would finally see him as a man. I don't know how he was going to be able to explain getting all that money, but maybe getting all that money was about, maybe the lot, maybe the lot was real, I guess. And then he would have found some way out of the whole thing, and he could have been a man or whatever by the end. But I think Wade would have turned on the passive aggressive, undercutting Jets even harder. If Jerry ever dared to really legitimately stand on his own 2 feet and be able to provide for his own family and not need Wade's money, I think Wade would go insane. I really do. And because men like this need to control someone. It is like they need air to breathe. And when you remove it from them, they become completely bitter and angry and hateful and constantly trying to undercut the person who has come in to separate them from their daughter or their son, whatever it may be. And so I think Wade would have been even worse towards Jerry if Jerry could have pulled this all off, you know?
I think you make a great point, and it goes back to sort of what we were saying before of like, how did Jerry end up marrying Wade's daughter, and how did all this go down? And we were both because obviously Wade hates him.
Yeah.
But based on what you say, maybe there's also a part of Wade that it's validating for him to have this wimpy guy to lord it over, you know?
100%. 100%. Because I also think Wade's a guy who shuts himself off from everybody. Wade doesn't give a fuck about anybody, right?
No.
The fact that this other man, and Stan, he respects Stan because Stan knows finances, but Stan in no way is going to like count, like, how can I say this? Stan in no way is going to like ridicule Wade or threaten Wade because Wade sees Stan as an equal, right? And I'm sure Stan's like the Bob Cratchit to his Ebenezer Scrooge. He works for him, he does his thing, maybe a higher level than Bob Cratchit.
Yeah,
but,
he's higher than Bob Cratchit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like Wade has met Stan's family, but I don't think Wade goes on vacations with Stan or Stan's family. Or they might have a dinner once a year with his family. That's about it, you know? And so you see that they clearly understand their business relationship. And Stan knows that as well. But Jerry is the one in his world, and Jerry is the one that he needs to lord over. You know, some dudes just need this shit because they're so, I don't know, they're just so fucked up inside about it.
I mean, I also think there's sort of a, you know, big fish in small pond thing is that in whatever pond Wade is in, he is a big fish.
Yeah, Brainerd, for God's sake. Yeah.
But in you know, if Wade goes off to New York, Wade is not a big fish. No, you know,
they'd eat Wade up and spit him out.
Yeah. And then I love that after we listen to him practicing his lines for a while, we cut to him practicing getting the emotions just right. But what sells it for me is that he finally feels like he's got it. And then he picks up the phone and dials. And then in an entirely non-emotional voice, because he's talking to the receptionist, so there's no reason to perform yet, he says,
Wade Gustafson, please.
And it just made the fact that he's just completely not emotional after working on that role just sells it for me.
He's not going to waste it on the secretary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because he's a sociopath.
Right. Exactly.
Because, I mean, when you walk into the bathroom and you see the damage, he has to know that, it might have gotten violent. My wife might be hurt or killed.
And the fact he has to practice the emotion, like he can't even legitimately be hurt or scared for his wife, seeing all this stuff. He has to practice it. It's not in his nature to be legitimately scared for his wife. He can be scared for himself, but he'll never be scared for his wife.
And then that heavy music hits. There's a very ominous shot of the Paul Bunyan statue now.
Yes.
And now we're in the car. The camera is behind, shooting from behind, and Buscemi, who's driving. We can hear the whimpering and realize that Gina's under a blanket in the back seat.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, or I'll throw you back into the trunk, you know?
Jeez, it's more than I've heard you say all week.
And then the next moment, we hear the siren.
Ah, shit.
By the way, they talked a lot about, well, what do we want to see in this world? Like, because you could have lit the street more so that you can see more of the surrounding environment.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, they went, you know what? We just want an empty void. It's the lights of the headlights and just black emptiness. And I'm sure you've done this drive at night where you're in the middle of fucking nowhere and it's like you're driving on nothing. It's just headlights and black, you know?
The 10 from Tallahassee to Jacksonville. It is a wasteland. It is Mad Max. There's nothing. And it's not even gorgeous vegetation or trees. It's literally a wasteland. I've fallen asleep on that road driving late at night when I was younger. I have had to play music really loud to stay awake. Like it can absolutely suck you into its darkness if you drive at night on the 10 there between Tallahassee and Jacksonville. So.
There are a bunch of driving across Texas was like that. They're driving up to
100%. You're right.
And you can go kind of loopy in your brain.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. If you take, I think it's the 10 or the 95. If you go through the tip of Texas, you're fine. But if you take that road from like Florida or Virginia down through, because we did that. We drove cross country, my dad and I. And if we had taken the road that goes deeper into Texas, we'd have driven like 4 or 5 hours through like the wasteland of areas of Texas. And I was glad we didn't do that. I had no desire to do that. So driving just across the tip, which I think took us an hour and a half, and we still encountered like 30 minutes of just nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we realize is that it's because he hadn't done something with the tags, because it's a car out of a dealership. And then Buscemi leans back to talk to Jean, and I think this line reveals something about him. He says,
All right, just keep it still back there, lady, or else we're going to have to, to shoot you.
Here's what I think that line reveals about him, and I'm curious about your thoughts. I think it reveals that A, he has never shot anybody, and B, he has no intention, he has no thoughts in his brain about really killing her. The way he says, to shoot you is like it's an empty, it feels like he knows he's saying an empty threat.
100%. I think Garrett would have absolutely shot her.
Yep.
And probably raped her too, because he seems like a real degenerate. Even more sociopathic than Jerry. He's like evil sociopath. Like Jerry is smarmy, passive-aggressive sociopath, which you could argue is maybe worse because he tries to be human. Garrett is not human at all. And I think he would absolutely do terrible things to her before he killed her.
Yep.
But Buscemi, you're right. Buscemi is not a killer. And I think Garrett knows that, right? So all of his threats are just a mouse screaming up at a human being.
So the cop is coming up, and Carl says he's going to handle it. And I'm always fascinated by watching actors giving degrees of the lie, and how they modulate it. And I think Buscemi does such a perfect job of being 87% confident in selling this lie with 13% underneath where you can tell he's lying, you know?
Yeah.
But by the way, this is all shot in a garage in Minnesota, so we're actually inside.
Wow.
But they didn't heat it at all, so it was so cold that you could still see their breath. It's really, really cold.
Is the new car in, sir?
Oh, it certainly is, officer. Still got that smell.
Still got that smell is exactly the kind of line like, see how casual I am, And we hear that it is the tags, and he asks his license registration.
Yeah, I was going to tape up the tag, to be in full compliance, but must have slipped my mind.
And he pulls out his wallet with his license in it and pulls it out in such a way there's a $50 bill hanging out very obviously and says,
So maybe the best thing to do would be to take care of that right here in Brainerd.
The whole concept of bribing a cop seems so scary to me.
Of course.
My God.
Not that it doesn't happen, but
of course.
Still, I don't know how you, I don't know how you read that situation where you think you could get away with something like that.
I mean, some cops take bribes.
No, I know.
Some cops don't. Yeah. And the cop's reaction is great.
What's this, sir?
My license and registration. Yeah, I want to be in compliance. I was just thinking we could take care of it right here in Brainerd.
This does not go over well.
No.
Asks him to put the wallet away and step out of the car, and then that's where Jean starts whimpering.
Yeah.
And as soon as we hear that, we know, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And the cop hears it. He leans in, and instantly and shockingly, Peter Stormar grabs him by the hair, slams into the door, and then while his head is just sort of hovering there at the window, he reaches into the glove box, pulls out a gun, and shoots him in the head in such a way that I can only imagine that brains just poured out on Steve Buscemi's lap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's shot so well to see the blood splatter just slightly on Buscemi's face, but enough to unsettle him. As you said, he's not a guy who has shot someone probably or ever thought about shooting someone. So to have someone be shot in this way so brutally right in front of him, and the blood and possible brain matter fall on him is a lot for him to deal with.
His reaction is so great.
Oh yeah,
it's just a perfect. Totally shocked. Like you can see in the wheels turning that he's realizing, oh, my life might never be the same again. Everything has changed in this moment. We've killed a cop.
Whoa, Daddy. You'll take care of it. You're smooth,
and he's he's got to clear him off the road, and he puts on some gloves, gets out, grabs the body, totally struggles to move him. By the way, it's 20 below when they're shooting this.
Wow.
So it is cold, which means they're having equipment problems. Cameras run on batteries and sound equipment runs on batteries. They're dying. They have a lot of equipment problems. And as he's starting to move the body, they see some headlights coming. And again, this is shot so well because this car is pulling up and it slows down just perfectly to get a shot of the passengers, of the people in the car looking at Buscemi dragging the cop's body and staring, and them seeing them stare before they speed off.
Yeah.
Stormar switches into the driver's seat, makes a U-turn, chases. The shot of him driving and smoking is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Super dramatic. Low angle along the road as they catch up. And then as he's driving, suddenly the taillights they disappear. We don't see them for a second. And then he looks around and sees that the car has flipped over on the side of the road, slams on his brakes. The guy in a red parka gets out of the car, starts running across the snow. Garrett follows with the gun, looking just very casual and very dangerous. Raises his weapon, shoots the guy in the back, who, by the way, is the storyboard artist for the movie. That's who he just killed. And then goes over to the car where the other passenger is, leans in. We hear the beeping of the door, which I think is a great detail. Yeah. And he looks down at this woman, breathing heavily in the back seat, and kills her.
So, I've made the connection between Wade and Jerry with Garrett and Carl. And again, here's another situation, right? If Wade was a criminal, Wade would have absolutely slammed the deputy's head and shot him straight in the head. It's done, right? Wade is the guy who takes care of business. And when it has to happen, he'll do it. And if he has to ice someone out, he'll ice someone out. Garrett had no question or thought about Carl's discomfort or Carl's worry or blood getting on Carl's body or anything like that. He didn't care. Get out of the situation. Then he ridicules him to emasculate Carl even more. And what's Carl been complaining about? That Garrett doesn't talk to him. Well, he finally talks to him, and he does it in a way to emasculate him, right? So we've been talking about the manhood situation here. And so clearly it's how Garrett approaches his manhood, which is I take care of business and I kill whoever I need to kill in order to stay alive and do what I'm doing, regardless of whoever else has an issue with it. He makes Carl take care of the body, who clearly is the smaller and the less stronger of the two, because Garrett could have easily taken care of the body, but tossed it out in the wilderness there or whatever and buried it, and it wouldn't have been an issue. But because Carl is struggling with the body is why that couple can see them. And it's because he's taking so long. Whereas Garrett would have probably done it within, I don't know, a few seconds. But he's taking so long to do it. And this is Garrett's punishment for Jerry. Look, I shot the guy. You take care of it because you're Mr. Smooth, right? So he's kind of ridiculing him. And I could see Wade and Jerry in the same situation with Jerry having moved the body that Wade just shot. And so when the couple drives by slow, as you said, is great. But then they take off because they're scared and nervous and whatever and feel threatened because they see the taillights pop up behind them that Garrett is driving the car, and they flip over. But what does the man do? The man leaves his wife behind.
Yep.
Again, we're talking about masculinity in this movie and the real versions of masculinity and the fakeness of Minnesota nice in some people. And this moment is really revealing. The fact that the guy left his live wife in the car to save himself, what an asshole, and gets shot anyway, and shot in the back, which I think he deserves. And his poor wife gets shot there in the car in a prone position. And as we find out in a little bit, she covered her hand in a fetal attempt to stop the bullet from killing her. So these things are really interesting to consider in their commentary on the movie about men. And I really appreciate it when you're watching the movie, as it really it's like 5 levels deep or 3 levels deep that they're making this commentary amidst everything else that's happening.
I think there's a distinction in this movie between the people who talk but are full of shit and the people who don't talk.
Yeah.
It's like Jerry is a talker. He's telling you all these things about why he's trustworthy or why he's a good person or a good investment or why you should buy a car from him.
Yeah.
And it's bullshit. And when pushes come to shoves, Jerry's got nothing there. And Carl's the same thing. Carl is talk.
Yeah.
But when the real stuff happens, it's Gehrig who's going to do it. And when you look at Shep is not a talker.
Yeah,
Shep is scary and dangerous.
Yeah.
Mike Yamagichi is a talker. Like, he's going to tell you all sorts of bullshit about himself that isn't true to get people to do. This is what, and actually I think it's really important, is are people manipulating you, trying to manipulate you through words, or are they doing things through actions?
Yeah.
Jerry, Mike, Carl are all word manipulators. Marge isn't trying to convince anybody of anything.
No.
She's just doing her job.
And her husband, Norm, barely talks in the movie.
He doesn't need to.
The only thing he talks to do is to support her or to make her eggs or to talk about his painting. That's it.
And I think that's actually makes this the perfect moment to end part one of our exploration of Fargo, because here at 33 minutes into the film, we are about to meet our hero. And so we will wait to meet the great, great Marge Gunderson, one of my favorite heroes in all of film, for part two of our exploration of Fargo. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts about part one. You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on X, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. And of course, and we'd love to hear from you there. And of course, please subscribe to the show if you haven't already. You could subscribe everywhere. There are dozens of podcast platforms, but the big ones, of course, are Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where we'd love to get your reviews and comments. Comments, of course, on YouTube are great. And you can buy or stream Fargo along with every other film we've ever reviewed at cinephiles.net. And as we said at the beginning of the show, the best way to support us is either a subscription through Apple Podcasts or patreon.com/thecine-files, where you can listen to this show ad-free, as well as our Cine-Files shorts and our watch-alongs, and you can join our advisory board. And if you want to reach me, it's SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how about you?
You can always find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads. That's where I'm at. And my YouTube channel, please head on over to subscribe to that, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, The Outlaw Nation. A lot of stuff going on there. And my other podcast, The Geek Buddies and The Hot Mic, they're there for you all to subscribe to separately.
And I think that's it for this week. We'll be back next week to continue our exploration of Fargo right here on the Cine-Files.